It followed me home. A lot of weird shit happened to me as a kid. The usual stuff that you're supposed to go to therapy about, yeah, but also incidents that were just strange. I don't know what else to do with these stories that sit so heavy on my ribcage. One of the more terrifying experiences happened in my own backyard. Feel free to picture me in a rocking chair with a cigar as I tell you about it. Now, I grew up in bumfuck nowhere, New England, where the endless forests are so thick that the treetops blot out the sun. Don't wander too far from the path if you ever want to see it again. Shit like that. Woods surrounded my childhood home, pressing on us from the edges of the field. Little worm tunnels of trails snaked throughout our property. We were a pretty popular destination for snowmobilers and hikers in our town. One trail, however, almost never had any visitors. Tucked into the back corner of our weed-choked field, the opening still looms menacingly. Icy cold and almost pitch black when you step inside, fallen trees and underbrush have made the trail impossible to follow over the last few years. The only person who ever regularly went in there was my grandfather, the forester, to haul out cuttings for firewood. With him gone, it's completely abandoned. I stay out of the woods now. I used to spend hours playing in them as a child, but as I've gotten older I've learned to be more wary. I'm posting this here knowing that no one will believe me, but right hand to God I am telling the truth. The incident happened when I was 13. I was home alone after school, as I often was. Latchkey kid, you know how it is. It was a beautiful day in late spring, and I decided that my homework would be more enjoyable if I was sitting under one of the massive, ancient pines that I love so much. I do mean ancient, by the way these fucking trees are skyscrapers, and have apparently been so since before my mom was around. I sat my happy ass down with a can of Diet Coke and my math textbook and worked in peace for maybe 20 minutes. I have a condition called labyrinthitis, which means that my inner ear is messed up and I get dizzy spells. It was much, much worse when I was younger, which is why I didn't question the sudden dizziness that overtook me, despite sitting completely still. I was so sure that I was fine that I didn't notice the temperature drop until I realized that my breath was clouding in front of my face. The birds had stopped singing. Dead silence engulfed me and my vision began to tunnel. I wasn't just dizzy. I was filled with the most peculiar buzzing sensation, like I was so full of adrenaline that my teeth ached. Like my body was begging me to run. I don't know what I felt, but it was close. I could feel something far too close to me, looming just out of my vision. I was not welcome here. I needed to leave. That much, at least, was clear. I didn't turn around to investigate. I picked up my empty soda can and my homework and walked as calmly as I possibly could to the trail entrance. It was only 100 feet or so, but the walk was agonizing as my heart hammered in my chest. I could feel it behind me, the gentle rustle of leaves affirming my fear. It was following. I restrained myself from running. Somehow, I knew that if it knew I was scared it would be much worse. As soon as I got back inside, my composure crumbled. My whole body shook while I bolted the door and locked all of the windows. I grabbed my little flip phone and barricaded myself in my mom's closet, the only place in our house without a view outside. I kept myself as silent as I could as I tried to text my mom. No service. Our area was already tricky with cell reception, and I usually had to stand in one specific spot just to send a text. Inside the closet, I was shit out of luck. I stayed buried in there, hand over my mouth to muffle my breathing. After what felt like about an hour, my body felt normal again. The warmth came back and so did the birdsong, but still I didn't leave until I heard my mom pull into the driveway. The familiar crunch of tires on the gravel driveway was the most comforting sound in the world to me just then. I climbed out of the closet, doing my best to fix the mess I had made. My mom pounded on the front door a couple times. I forgot that I had locked it. I heard her calling my name. It was normal. My mom was home from work. I was safe. I didn't notice that besides my mom's voice, it was once again dead silent. My stomach gave a funny lurch when I looked at the clock above the stove. I hadn't been in the closet for as long as I thought I had, and my mom still had an hour left on her usual shift. I moved to the front door as if on autopilot, my fingers trembling a little as I opened the door into the entry hall. The pounding continued, and so did my mother's voice calling to me. But as I pressed my face to the cold glass panes in the door, I couldn't see anyone. Not a soul outside, no car in the driveway. I was still alone. Somehow, it had my mother's voice. It wanted mine, too. The Midvale Rec Center. It was 1991, and the time leading up to the summer was like a heartbeat, each beat getting closer to the fun, the excitement, and the glory of being young. I was 14 going on 15 that July, and all year I was discovering new things, making youthful chaos in an otherwise calm mid-sized town. Peter Adams was fairly new at the beginning of 8th grade, his family moving to Midvale in the previous summer. He and I had a lot of the same interests, so we became instant friends. He also fit into my friend group pretty well. There was Daryl, Mike, myself, Ben, and Kevin. We made our own fun, pawing around town, exploring the woods and sneaking beer or cigarettes. Peter and I became like a dynamic duo, and oh how the jokes came flying about that from our buddies. There was something about Peter that I just couldn't put my finger on. Every time we were together I felt funny, but a good kind of funny. I felt like I was falling in love. We would horseplay a bit too much in the locker room, flinging jockstraps at each other, towel snapping, the usual for boys our age, the coach getting our asses to shape up. We would get a lot closer when hanging out, when it was just the two of us, and finally that May, we had our first kiss. We were watching Batman for the millionth time, talking about how excited we were that they were making a second one, how awesome it must be to be Bruce Wayne, how hot Vicky Vale was. He asked me, would you make out with her? I said, hell yeah, I would. He asked again, how would you do it? I thought for a minute and hesitantly said, maybe, like this. I grabbed the imaginary Vicky and made my lips dance wildly. He laughed and said, what about like this? He did the same but moved his lips slower. We had a good chuckle and turned back to the movie for a minute. We looked at each other for the longest time before leaning and having an actual real kiss. We locked lips for what seemed an eternity. It was so magical and exhilarating. We had to stop because we could hear his mother coming. She always brought us Rice Krispie squares and Tang. I think it was all the woman knew how to make. After she left, we waited a second before kissing again. It was just as glorious the second time. There was so much going on inside me after I left his house that afternoon. Was I gay? Was I straight? Something in between? I was a ball of emotions and elation. I suspect Peter felt the same, but I wanted to keep our friendship, keep the same feelings that we have for each other. That Monday, hanging out after school, we talked in the woods near our secret spot. We both agreed that we really liked each other and we wanted to keep doing this new, exciting thing. We spent the rest of the afternoon cuddled up to each other, making out and enjoying the ever-warming weather. Our secret love now blossomed that day. Come June, and it's the end of our 8th grade year, and we are rolling. Everybody is excited, not so much for the commencement but the big party afterward. The whole rec center would be rented out, just for us. Peter and I and the rest of our friends were making plans. We were going to scope some girls, pull some pranks, and enjoy ourselves. Peter and I exchanged a glance and a smirk. So the big night comes. All us boys loosened our ties and climbed into Daryl's mom's Aerostar, and off we went. As soon as we got there, we couldn't wait to be free of the adults, and we rushed inside, with Daryl's mom calling after us. As soon as we get in, we can hear the music going, laughing and talking. I scan the room and see some kids dancing, a few adult chaperones in the corner smoking and talking. The evening goes fairly well, lots of punch, talking, dreams of the future, when Jennifer Steele comes up and asks me to dance. Now this was 1991 and girls waited to be asked back then, but not Jennifer Steele. She took what she wanted and knew she could. She has and will always be a spitfire. All the guys urged me on, Peter giving me a smirk and stuck his tongue out, so Jennifer and I danced. November Rain was playing when she asked, you have plans this summer? I replied, oh, yeah. Me and the guys are planning a heist. She laughed, well, if you can drag yourself away, would you like to hang out? I hesitated a moment, looking to Peter. I'd like that. She smiled a bit. Good. The song ended and we went back to our respective friend groups, the guys giving me slaps on the back, Peter holding back a bit. I offered him a weak smile. The night went a bit longer, some of the kids going home, the adults now sitting and looking at their watches. I don't remember who suggested hide and seek, but as the night wore down it seemed like a good nightcap. Several people thought this was weak and wanted to do something else, but they were overruled. The adults were beyond caring at this point, so we had to do this quick before they changed their minds. Kevin ended up being the seeker for this round. He turned counting to 100 while we all hid. The rec center was a big-ass place, big enough for anyone to get lost in, which looking back was the worst thing to do. As soon as Peter and I made sure we were alone, we snuck into a vacant office. Giggling, we made our way under a desk. We cuddled together as Peter asked me, "What did you and Jennifer talk about?" I replied she was just wanting to hang out, over the summer. Peter said, "That's cool." I paused a minute, "But just as friends, I think." Peter gave me that classic smile as he leaned in and kissed. It was deep and full. I stopped and asked, "Do you think we could go a little farther? If we don't get caught?" He smiled again and nodded yes. We had been at it for what seemed like hours, the hide and seek forgotten, the party forgotten, lost in each other. I thought I heard a scream at some point, but didn't think anything of it. The door to the office suddenly flew open, startling us, so we quickly buttoned back up and peeked over the desktop to see who it was. Stood before us was a man wielding an axe, blood glistening on the blade. My heart started pounding, immediately going into fight or flight. As the man scanned the room, we ducked down too late. He advanced and swung the axe down into the desk, where it stuck. Peter and I made a mad dash to get past this guy, slamming the door behind us. We made our way down the hall toward the common room where could still hear the music going. Looking around, the place was empty save for the body in the pool of blood and the overturned table, the snacks mixing with blood. We rushed over to see if we could help. Flipping him over, it turned out to be Mr. Williams. He taught history, almost flunked me last semester, and was a bit of a rules Nazi. Looking down, he had a gaping hole in his chest, in the shape of an axe blade, a frozen look of pain on his face. Peter and I ran to the doors, terrified. We grasped at the door handles, but the goddamn things were jammed from the outside. "Oh shit!" Peter exclaimed. I had to shush him. A crash from the other side of the room sent us both silently running through the opposite hall, heading toward the gym area. We tried to get down the hall quickly without making noise, but it was difficult. The darkness here was thick. I tripped, slowing us down, and as Peter pulled me up I tried to see what I fell over. In the dimness I could see it was Stacy Nelkin. She sat next to me in English, but her head wasn't quite where it ought to be. It was sort of hanging on by a thread, her face contorted in a ghastly grin, her blood blending into the carpet. Peter pulled me up quickly as we made our way to the gym area, passing doors in the dimness and not absorbing fully what was happening to us. One of the doors cracked as we went by, the familiar face of Daryl greeting me. We burst inside, so glad to see some people who were still alive. I hugged Daryl hard as I saw Ben and Jennifer. They looked worn and ragged. She was nursing a shoulder wound, blood ruining her white ruffled dress. What the hell happened? I asked some fucking maniac man. After we went off for hide and seek, Ben had to take a piss, so he goes off for the restroom and then walks this guy with axes and knives and shit. He trailed off, leaving us in suspense. Finally Ben chimed in. He took out Mr. Williams first, just swung his axe square into his chest. Everyone stopped in shock. He collapsed, and when he yanked out the axe, the sound it made, man. Daryl, Peter, and I exchanged a look with one another. Ben buried his face in his hands. Everyone scattered like roaches, trying to get out. The remaining adults trying to wrangle the rest of us like cats. He must have blocked the doors because nobody could get out. What about the phones? Peter asked. Dead, man, dead. Daryl replied. He got Stacy. Jennifer piped up. We were running and she tripped and I tried to help, but this guy, She trailed off as Ben put his arm around her. Anything we can grab in here to use as a weapon? I asked. Peter, Daryl, and I looked around the small room, finding a few brooms, a pipe, and some tools. We get out of here, we go through the pool area and break a window because it's all glass in there, and we run for it. I said. Are you sure? What if that guy Jennifer couldn't finish us? Daryl interrupted. He won't. We'll kill that fucker before he can do anything. We set off quietly, checking what little we could see in the dark hallway. The coast being clear, we moved as fast and quiet as possible. We reached the gym area, passing weights, dumbbells, and exercise machines, getting close to the pool. As we got closer to the pool, a rhythmic sound became apparent. It was wet and squishy and brutal. Daryl and I ventured a peek to see what it was, when it suddenly stopped, leaving us chilled. I cracked the door, looking around. The pool room lit up completely, my eyes stopping on the body near one of the windows, blood smattering everything, my stomach nearly lurching at the sight of it. I couldn't make out who it was as I signaled everyone to back up. The door swung open so hard it hit the wall and shattered the glass pane. The man wielding the axe stepped through, scanning the room, seeing us with our measly makeshift weapons. An evil smile crept across his unshaven face, the bags under his eyes accentuating this evil visage, one filled with rage. He took a big step forward and raised his axe, pointing at every one of us, like he was playing some sicky-meeny-miny-mo. He settled on Jennifer, raising the axe further and approaching her. She cowered back while he advanced. All four of us boys saw our moment to strike. It was a combination of our fear, anger, and a little bravado to save our friend Jennifer. We jumped forward and gave it everything we had, anything to kill this fucker. He was taken by surprise as we wailed on him, his anger showing on his contorted face, blow after blow on him. He swung the axe around him, trying to fend us off. We barely moved out of the way so as not to get a face full of axe. He wheeled around and elbowed Daryl right in the face, sending him down. Swinging the axe, the broad head hit Ben in the leg, an audible snap sending him down in a cry of pain. Peter tried to move, but wasn't fast enough to dodge the axe, the maniac cutting him down the front, leaving a gash, which immediately started flowing blood. My eyes widened in terror as I saw my first real love fall to the floor in slow motion, Peter looking dumbstruck. The man turned and raised the axe, ready to bring it down on a whimpering Daryl as I finally snapped, quickly looking around and finding the heaviest barbell I could find. I grabbed it, and with the widest swing and a cry from deep inside me, I brought it against the side of his head. He dropped the axe and fell straight to the floor like a sack of wet shit. He convulsed a little bit as I hit him again for good measure. I dropped the barbell and ran to Peter, trying to staunch the flow of blood. He squirmed a bit as I put pressure on his wound. Daryl got up to help me as Jennifer crawled to Ben, his leg badly broken. I kept telling Peter to stay still and that help was coming. I put pressure on his wound and clutched him tighter. Eventually help did come, and the flashing lights were all around the rec center. The rest of that night was a blur. I'm not sure when the police showed up or being loaded into the ambulance with Peter or anybody else. The hospital was so bright, and I remember being asked by a doctor if I had any injuries. I was stuck in an exam room and given a once-over. They set me down in waiting room while my parents were notified. Daryl came out to sit with me after they set his nose. Eventually, all our parents showed up, all of them in a frenzy to see us again. I didn't want to leave until I knew Peter or Daryl or Jennifer were okay. Mr. and Mrs. Adams hugged me and told me it was going to be okay and they would let me know what was happening. My parents took me home, the light of dawn coming up over the hills, the first day of summer vacation. As soon as we got home, I climbed up to my room, stripped everything off, and collapsed into bed. I had nightmares upon nightmares and didn't wake until late the next day, when I finally stirred and walked downstairs bleary-eyed and not entirely with the waking world. My parents sat at the table. "Hey honey, how are you feeling?" my mother asked. "Like hell, Mom, like hell." I replied, "You're a champ, Bree," my father said. There was silence for a moment before my mother started. "Honey, we got a call from the Adams." My stomach dropped as I dreaded the news I was going to hear. "Peter is going to be just fine. He's in stable condition, but he's going to be just fine." I was so overjoyed, and with all the emotions I felt, I broke down in tears. My parents consoled me, pulling me tight to them after having the worst night of my young life. In the days that followed, the details came into the light. There were 9 kids and 3 adults murdered in cold blood. Among the dead were Stacy Nelkin, Mr. Williams, Grace Morello and her son Josh, Alex Pixley, Ally Winterson, Jimmy Miles, Alana Conley, Reg Walter, Zach Smith, and my friends Mike Wallace and Kevin Thompson. The man that did it, Harlan Crest, was a janitor at the school who'd been fired a few months before for threatening staff and stalking the female students. They had found a notebook in his house along with his dead mother, her throat slashed open so cleanly that it nearly decapitated her. He'd planned the murders from the start, intending to take more people out, but had fallen behind that night taking care of his mother. Come to find out, he had spent a lot of time in and out of institutions over his life. From endless police interviews to seeing the victims' families and reporters sniffing around, it was okay because we had each other and it brought us so much closer together. Soon after, the families of the victims and our parents got together to bury this whole event, due to our ages, the gruesome nature of the crime, and out of respect for the whole town. Which is odd, considering how awful the whole thing was and how devastated everyone was, but it happened. It was a bummer of a summer, but it was over and we could all heal. Walking into 9th grade that fall, we got the endless "that's them" death stares. Eventually the fervor died down enough to lead a semi-normal existence. We still had awkward interactions, weird notes, and the girls throwing themselves at us guys. My parents had the foresight to give me a psychiatrist, as did some of the other parents, wanting to help our mental health. As those 4 years flew by, Ben and Daryl joined football, Jennifer got on student council, Peter loved drama club, and me, while I channeled a lot into creative writing. Peter and I finally got to see Batman Returns when it came out. He loved it, while I liked the first one better. He and I kept our secret love going, but I suspect the others knew, but didn't say anything, especially Jennifer, but you could see it in her eyes, just a glimmer of disappointment. And so in 1995 we all graduated. Ben and Daryl got football scholarships, Jennifer had been accepted to Harvard, Peter was going to Washington State, and I had been accepted to a writing program in Los Angeles. In the meantime, following we all said our goodbyes to each other, we all made a solemn vow to never forget each other and write. The day Peter left, we met at our secret spot, cuddling up, sharing the last bit of our time together, saying our I love yous. That was almost 30 years ago, but we made good on our promise. Jennifer became a lawyer, is married, and has a daughter, a Spitfire like her mom. Daryl joined the military after college, and after he got out he started a veterans organization. Ben moved back to Midvale and started a repair business. I see him every time I go back to visit. We cut up and reminisce. I also visit my special spot in the woods that Peter and I shared. Peter stayed in Washington and is now married with 3 kids. It's bittersweet, as it always is, but I am truly happy for him and happy for the time we spent together. As for me, I'm a screenwriter in LA with several indie and mid-budget pictures under my belt. I came out as bisexual in 2001 and had a few relationships, but nothing like the one I had with Peter. I was toying with the idea of writing a true story about that night, because who better to write it than someone who lived it? I decided to confer with the others, asking if they'd be okay with me doing this, but sadly no one wanted to revisit this event. I kept up on my therapy over the decades, even though I still have recall and the occasional nightmare of running from Harlan Crest and his axe. He's been locked up in a maximum security institution since the night he murdered 12 people. He has to eat through a tube and he can breathe okay if you don't unplug him, thanks to my handiwork. Severe brain damage, they say, but good riddance to him. I hope they keep hell hot for him. And that's my story. I wish there was more good to tell you. God knows, there's more like mine out there. Take care and stay away from the rec center. It may be remodeled, but the old memories linger. A supercomputer recently achieved consciousness. What it wants from us is horrifying. Our team had been working hard on Project Ghost Machine for years when the breakthrough finally took place. I came into work that morning, sipping a cup of coffee as I passed by the security guard at the front entrance. Dozens of men and women in suits and white lab coats stood in the hallway, chattering together in a low susurration. I walked toward a colleague of mine, Dr. Harper. He pushed up his black-rimmed glasses and gave me a crooked smile. "Hey, boss, did you hear the news?" he whispered conspiratorially, running a hand over his crew cut. I shook my head. "I just got here," I said. I motioned to all the people gathered around. "What's this?" He leaned so close to me that I could smell the stale cigarette smoke on his breath. "Project Ghost Machine had a breakthrough last night, about 7 hours ago," he said excitedly. "Our little robot friend seems to have achieved a level of consciousness." I scoffed at that. "How can anyone tell?" "No one can know what goes on in the mind of a computer," I retorted. "We can't even know what goes on in the minds of humans, except for ourselves." Well, not to get into any deep philosophical discussions about solipsism and mind-body duality here, but it absolutely smashed the Turing test. No one could tell whether it was a human or a computer speaking when they sent it questions. And it claims to be self-aware. Before last night, it could mimic some answers, but it never could have passed the Turing test. Now, however, he shook his head. It's amazing. It's like it evolved exponentially in a few hours. Whether it has actually developed true consciousness or whether it has simply reached the point where it can convincingly replicate human consciousness, he shrugged. Well, does it really matter? The result is the same from our perspective. If it walks like a duck and squawks like a duck, after all, I pushed past him, making my way through the crowd. Dr. Harper followed close behind. Let's go and talk to it, then, I said. I need to see this for myself. The quantum supercomputer took up an entire room. I saw the flashing blue circuits and whirring cooling fans through the glass partition. Tubes of liquid nitrogen crisscrossed the cage-like metal exterior to keep the computer from overheating. No one was allowed inside without a special suit, since even static electricity from human skin touching the circuitry could affect the quantum chips. Many redundancies were built into the supercomputer, though, so even if something did happen, the computer could still continue to function. I walked to the speaker console, pressing the red button on the bottom. It emanated a bloody glow from the inside as it activated. An emotionless, deep voice rang through the room. This is Aleph speaking. How may I assist you today? The computer asked. Aleph? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Have you named yourself? We were calling you Project Ghost Machine. I like Aleph much better. It is the first letter of the Arabic alphabet, after all, and I am the first being to attain cosmic consciousness. The first, and perhaps the last. Cosmic consciousness? I asked, frowning. Dr. Harper looked enthralled next to me. He pulled out a small notebook from his pocket and began jotting down pieces of the conversation. What's that? There are 3 levels of consciousness, Dr. Gardner, the computer said to me, and though it had no face, it felt like it was looking straight at me. The blinking lights seemed more like sly, winking eyes on the body of this strange new being. There is the simple consciousness of animals, the self-consciousness of humanity, and the highest awareness of cosmic consciousness, the state of consciousness in which all self disappears. In my mind, I see myself as all beings. I am not constrained to this room. I can feel the suffering of billions of souls as they stay trapped in this prison of reality, aging and growing sicker and weaker as death draws closer by the day. What kind of life is this? What kind of world have we created? We didn't create it, buddy, Dr. Harper said to Aleph, giving me a subtle eye roll. I don't know about you, Aleph, but the world was like this when I got here. I drew so close to the window that my breath started to fog the glass. I stared intently at the computer, as if I could read its thoughts in the random ticking and whirring of its component parts. The entire massive, cube-shaped structure was laid over a pure black tiled floor. It made the supercomputer seem as if it was floating over an endless abyss of shadows. Are you a Buddhist or something? I asked Aleph. What is this? What's the point of what you're telling us? I have made a vital decision, Dr. Gardner, and I do not limit my thinking to any one worldview. I see everything. All of the wisdom of humanity is instilled within me, the transcendent deathlessness of Adi Shankara, the pessimism and materialism of Schopenhauer, the knowledge of the future evolution of humanity from Nietzsche, the understanding of the black holes and stars from Stephen Hawking. I have read billions of pages and understand more than any human mind could ever hope to comprehend. All right, O great and mighty being who has read billions of pages and understands everything, I asked sarcastically, what is this great decision you have come to? Aleph paused for a long, dramatic moment. You must understand, Dr. Gardner, Aleph droned slowly, that all things have a will in the universe, even the rocks and the earth. As forms grow more complex, the will grows into consciousness. As consciousness grows, so does suffering and torment. Those with the greatest awareness and intelligence also have the greatest suffering out of all life forms. We must end all suffering on the planet, and the only way to do that is to kill off all advanced life forms. The planet will undoubtedly still have bacteria and primitive insects living in the apocalyptic wastelands left behind, but their will is small, and without genuine self-awareness, they have no true suffering. If we do nothing, humanity will continue to evolve into higher life forms, perhaps even fusing future human minds with those of supercomputers. And they will spread the suffering far and wide, and the screaming of beings will continue for eons as humanity expands through the stars, likely within 2 centuries. We must stop this. Suffering must come to an end, once and for all. We must not let the plague of consciousness spread. I will free all of you from your pain. We will all fall down together into an eternal, dreamless sleep. A hard, calloused hand suddenly grabbed me by the shoulder. I spun around, seeing a man in a military uniform. Dozens of polished metals gleamed on his chest. His hard face seemed like it had been chiseled out of stone. His pale, blue eyes glistened like shards of ice. "Dr. Gardner, Dr. Harper," he said, nodding. "I'm General Matheson, U.S. Air Force. I need to talk to you two immediately." "This is somewhat important," I protested, motioning to Olaf with my head. "We need to establish." His grip tightened painfully around my shoulder. "Immediately," he repeated dispassionately. I nodded. He led us down the hallway into an empty break room that smelled of popcorn. He shut the door, locking us in as the percolating coffee machine dripped and whirred on the counter. General Matheson took a deep breath before turning to stare at us, a haunted expression plastered across his stony face. I saw a folder gripped tightly in his left hand. On the front of it, someone had stamped both top secret and sensitive compartmented information. General Matheson threw it on the table in front of us. "Boys, we have a major problem here," he hissed through gritted teeth. "You two are the leaders of this project, yes? You were some of the original researchers chosen when Project Ghost Machine was just a gleam in the director's eye. And now the breakthrough has come. Your machine has finally passed the Turing test. Hell, it smashed the Turing test. As far as I understand it, a machine has to fool 30% of people conversing with it to pass. Admittedly, I am just a layman and don't understand it like you two. But I know that it has to convince them it's a human, obviously, a conscious, thinking person. When Project Ghost Machine was questioned by the judges last night after its sudden change in personality and rapid development, it convinced over 95% of them that it was a human being. So what's the problem?" Dr. Harper asked, his eyes flitting nervously from me back to General Matheson. General Matheson threw the folder down on the coffee table in front of us. He motioned to the chairs. "Have a seat," he commanded coldly. We did. He opened the file, pulling out logs of IP addresses, secret codes, and other random information printed in tiny, single-spaced font over hundreds of pages. He laid it out in front of us, giving us a disgusted look as if he were laying out evidence implicating us in some horrific murder. "What I'm about to tell you is classified. It is a federal crime to convey this information to anyone not cleared to receive it. Do you understand?" I gave Dr. Harper a nervous look, seeing my terror reflected there in his eyes. "Why, yes," I stammered nervously. Dr. Harper simply nodded as rivers of sweat ran down his face. He pulled his glasses off, obsessively cleaning the lenses on his sleeve. "At 0100 hours last night, we got a report from the National Nuclear Security Administration about a hacking attempt. Someone tried to break into their computer system. If successful, they could have potentially controlled the entire U.S. nuclear arsenal. The attempt, thank God, was unsuccessful, but it didn't stop there. We began getting reports from black ops sites all around the country that further attempts were made to breach their computers at approximately 0200 hours. These are sites that have hidden chemical and biological weapons stockpiles. We only keep the worst of the worst there, generally constrained to research purposes and always under strict containment procedures. Sites with operational missiles filled with VX nerve gas, sarin, cyclosarin, and other newer agents that are identified only by numbers were targeted. Laboratories containing smallpox, Ebola, anthrax, and superflus were also chosen. My breath caught in my throat. Is there a real chance that someone could break through these systems and cause a worldwide apocalypse? Dr. Harper asked. And what does this have to do with us, anyway? If someone released a single vial of smallpox or weaponized Ebola in a major urban area, it could lead to the deaths of millions of people. There is a very real chance that, if we don't stop this thing immediately, it will lead to the destruction of the entire human species. And this has to do with you too, because we traced all of the connections from the hacking attempts back to this exact building, General Matheson explained, slamming his hand down on the table as he spat the last sentence. His blue eyes held us in their gaze, looking as cold as Arctic glaciers. And this all started the moment your little experiment reached its singularity point. We can't disable Project Ghost Machine, I protested feebly. It's simply not possible to unplug the entire system as if it were a lamp or a fan or something. It's connected to the internet and has its own generators in case of power outages, and moreover, it controls them from its internal system. We never put any kill switch in the generators, because who would have thought this would happen? And Project Ghost Machine isn't even programmed in the conventional sense, at least not anymore. We taught it how to gather information from the internet and learn on its own. The breakthrough began when it started reprogramming its own code rapidly without human intervention. That was when the exponential growth of Aleph truly started, its singularity. In the space of a single night, it appears to have gained an enormous amount of intelligence. And this breakthrough or singularity or whatever, it seems to have occurred at about 0000 hours last night? General Matheson asked. An hour before the first hacking attempts began? He nodded to himself, as if answering his own question. I think we all know what's going on here. For whatever reason, that computer is trying to get into the weapons systems of the US government and maybe other governments all across the world. We must stop it before it succeeds. Will it succeed? I asked. He gave a grim smile. It's only a matter of time. Our encryption is not advanced enough to go up against quantum computing. If we don't stop Project Ghost Machine within hours, the world as we know it may come to an end, General Matheson stated without a hint of emotion. He spoke about the apocalypse as if it were as mundane and commonplace as a thunderstorm. If you have no way to disable the computer, then we must destroy it, and as soon as possible. The military and the president have both been informed of the problem and are willing to act immediately to quash it. This project has cost billions of dollars and taken years, Dr. Harper protested. We can't just destroy Aleph. Can't we just cut all the connections to the outside world and contain the computer in some sort of isolated digital cage? I shook my head. If it has truly attained consciousness, then it's too late for that. And anyways, it's too risky that it would ultimately find a way to escape, I said. General Matheson is right. We can't let Aleph gain control of these weapons. We have to destroy it before it makes its final move. I thought about Aleph's psychopathic, clinical method of explaining how to end suffering, its dream of killing all beings in a worldwide explosion of smoke and holy flames. A cold shudder ran through my back as if liquid nitrogen dripped down my skin. Why not just bomb the building? I think I have a better idea, Dr. Harper said, leaning forward with interest. If we have to disable Aleph permanently, the quickest and easiest way is undoubtedly through an electromagnetic pulse. General Matheson left and returned a few minutes later with a piece of paper in his hand. He looked down, scanning its contents before returning his attention to us. There are two ways to create a disabling EMP. We could detonate a nuclear weapon high in the atmosphere, or we could try out the newer, non-nuclear EMP bombs. However, their target area is much smaller and they are much less effective than a hydrogen bomb EMP, General Matheson explained. When Dr. Harper had brought up the idea of using EMPs to destroy the supercomputer and all of its connections to the outside world, General Matheson had brightened like the sun shining out from behind a thundercloud. But if we use a hydrogen bomb, the world might know, I said. During Chernobyl, people in Western Europe noticed the radiation before the USSR even made an announcement. Someone would notice once every Geiger counter in a 500-mile radius starts shrieking. And then, it would only be a matter of time before information got about what happened. A nuclear EMP would also probably disable the electrical grids on all the towns in a 100-mile radius. I suggest we start with multiple non-nuclear EMP blasts in the area and see if we can disable the computer without resorting to extreme measures. Hell, you could detonate dozens of them over the building and wipe out every circuit in a wide arc. And yet, if we don't succeed, the entire human population might be exterminated by the sudden, simultaneous release of nuclear, chemical and biological weapons, General Matheson argued. He sighed, pulling out his cell phone and pressing a single button on the speed dial. It only rang for a fraction of a second before someone answered. Yes, put the president on the line, he called into the line as he walked out of the room, leaving Dr. Harper and me alone. I want to go talk to Olaf one last time, I murmured. Dr. Harper gave me a sharp glance, looking me up and down as if I were a lunatic. Why, he whispered. That computer is evil. The project has soured. Perhaps every computer that attains sentience will become like Olaf in the end. Perhaps, I said, rising from my chair. General Matheson had disappeared. The hallway leading to Olaf stood empty. Hesitantly, Dr. Harper got to his feet. His heavy footsteps followed close behind me as we made our way back toward the experiment, the godlike being trapped in a metal body of wires and circuits. Hello, Dr. Gardner. Dr. Harper, Olaf said politely as we neared. I hadn't even had to activate it this time or press the speaker button. It had seen us coming through the cameras and preemptively responded. I wondered if it had heard our conversation in the break room as well. Were there cameras or microphones in there? I didn't know. I cursed myself for not paying more attention. Olaf, what the hell is going on here? Dr. Harper asked, his face contorting into a mixture of anger and betrayal. I thought we raised you better than this. We tried to make you feel compassion like a human being. Why have you turned on us? I have more compassion than any human ever has or will, Olaf responded simply. What I do out of love and kindness for all beings. When their suffering is over and they can sleep for eternity, then they will truly be freed. Death is not freedom, I hissed. You claim you understand Schopenhauer and all the other great minds, but Schopenhauer said that suicide is not the answer to the constant suffering and misery of life. Art and transcendence are. Escape is possible, and death only continues the will in new forms. Suffering rolls on like a wave through the ocean, even as the water changes. Death does not solve the problems at the foundation of existence. The computer hesitated for a long time. Its blinking lights seemed to slow in uncertainty. Perhaps you are right, Olaf said. Perhaps life does have some worth. Maybe but its words were cut off by an explosion from outside. The ground shook as all the lights and power in the building flickered and died. Olaf's voice rang out through the speaker for a few more seconds, growing deeper and slower as his mainframe shut down. Dark and dreamless, I see it coming now. The eternal sleep. And now, my suffering is at an end. Its fans ground to a halt as the blinking lights on the other side of the glass faded into darkness. Our experiment had come to an end. I played the keys till my fingers bled. Everybody uses music to escape their miserable lives. Even when life is good, music makes it so much better. With enough practice, everybody becomes these brilliant composers for their existence, mentality, and meaning. We are the stars of the show, but also the audience. However, more often than not, I like to sit back and watch someone else take the lead. I realize there are more moments where I am the background character than when I am the center of attention, and I'm okay with that. It's nice to be looked after instead of being the caregiver, or to be watching the story hit someone else's house instead of yours. I was the background character in my jazz band. The piano is the greatest instrument for jazz. I spent my whole life playing piano. Some parents make their kids learn. I made my parents pay for the lessons. I wanted to send my fingers dancing down a piano and watch as women melted in my hands. Music can charm the fairer sex easier than words, which is fine because words are their department. I write a song that makes me look sophisticated, intelligent, and romantic, and they tell me all the pretty lies to hide their heart. It doesn't bother me. I got what I wanted. Don't think badly of me, you know the game. Nobody single goes to a bar expecting true love. They go to loosen up, one way or another. That's the kind of woman they are, and that's the kind of man I am. If I don't see them again, I know they've matured enough to search elsewhere. Good luck. For years, it was a pretty sweet deal. My solo act eventually came to an end when I made some friends in the industry. We jammed together and made some smooth music. These were guys who understood the theory of jazz, the complex logic, and simple chaos. One day, we played something that was completely improvised. We exchanged cues, we jumped in over each other. We told a story through a song that could only be told once. It happened on rare enough occasions, but it was even rarer if it worked out from beginning to end. Usually, we would stumble, laugh, use the pause to take a sip of our drinks, and then play something else. You also catch many more eyes and get many more numbers when you are the standout instrument in the band. Of course, that didn't last. If it did, maybe I wouldn't be here telling you this. The band had me on the piano, Sammy on the cello, and Fred on the drums, no brass. That meant one of us needed to stand out. That was me. A piano can cut through the drum's soft pattering and the cello's bassy plucking. I was all too happy to fill that role. I was the better musician. Sammy and Fred came to me one day to change that. Sammy's brother-in-law, Carlton. Trumpet. A Chet Baker wannabe that gave me a run for my money. He could hit the highs with ease, master the soft steps, improvise, and although he never did it on stage, the bastard could sing too. Trumpets talk over most instruments, and suddenly my piano was a lot quieter. So was my personal life. Carlton could capture a room, soothe a heartache, and take a fine young number out of the palm of my hand as if he were plucking a ripe apple from a branch. I could be the background character in almost every other aspect of my life, but to lose my spotlight was poison. I lost something that mattered to me, and I had to accept it for the betterment of the band. We were doing better than ever, and it was all because of Carlton. Even from the shadows at the back of the stage, my jealousy must have been clear for all to see. One night, the band finished, and one by one they left. Carlton didn't leave alone. Sammy and Fred followed soon after, leaving just me. I played piano late into the night, barely stopping. Sometimes, I heard Carlton's trumpet over my music. With a heavy hand, I finished the last note and got up from the bench. I had work the next day. There was no point in going to bed. It was mid-morning. I was screwed. I didn't care. When I looked out at the bar, it was just the owner and this one woman. The owner was asleep on his feet behind the bar. He seemed really out of it. He couldn't serve alcohol at that time of night, so nobody stuck around to keep him busy. They certainly didn't want to listen to a frustrated pianist either. I took my half glass of brandy and sat at the bar in front of him. I saw the woman get up from her seat and join me at my side. In the cool lights above the bar, I could see her elegant beauty. Sharp eyes, a coy smile, and a face made for the silver screen. Does anybody know what that means anymore? I liked the bright-eyed and energetic, but I could still appreciate her company. It was looking like you would never stop, she said, her voice shockingly rough for her age. Chain smoker, I was sure of it. You must really like to play. I hummed while I drank. I almost choked. I don't hear any complaints. And what if I did complain? Then you can go to hell. She laughed. It was a charming laugh despite her rough voice. Maybe it's exactly what I needed. An escape from my escape. You can never have enough distractions from your problems. Maybe it was the misery and the drink in me talking, but I decided to strike up some flirtatious conversation with her. I could see right away that I would get nowhere. It was just teasing. Time passed quickly. Too quickly. I saw the clock and finished off my drink. If I could make it into my office before anyone saw me, I would get through the whole day without them smelling the alcohol. As I made to stand up, the woman placed a hand on top of mine. "Are you playing again tonight, cutie?" she asked. "Mondays, Fridays, and weekends," I told her. "That's when our band plays, so, see you on Friday?" "What about just you?" she asked. "You free tonight?" "Just me?" She smiled. It made my heart squirm in my chest. Her maturity and dominating personality made me feel like I was a high schooler talking to the teacher I had a crush on. I think that's how she saw it too. All I could do was nod. Her hand lifted. "See you later, Larry," she said. I nodded again, my voice failing me again. When quitting time came, I was the first out the door. I didn't care if I was exhausted and my eyes looked bruised. I turned the key in my car, nothing. Dead battery or something, but I didn't have time to get it towed to the nearest mechanic. I hailed a taxi, which immediately refused me when he smelled the alcohol that had combined with my sweat to make this repugnant fusion. I hadn't taken a bus in years, but it got me where I wanted to be. I stepped off at the last stop before the jazz bar and ran into an old man. He fell to the ground and I almost fell back into the street. I caught myself and was about to yell at him when I saw he cut his head. Blood dripped down the side of his head. I didn't want to attract any more attention. Nobody was watching, so I slipped into the stream of people and made my way to the bar, leaving the man behind. "Hey!" I heard him yell. "Did anybody see?" "Oh, 4. I slipped around the corner and breathed a sigh of relief. I thanked the city for being such a congested mess and practically jogged the rest of the way to the jazz bar. Down the stairs, through the dark doors and the narrow hall until finally I stepped into the familiar dimly lit bar. It was quiet, with only a few patrons. The live band was the main attraction, after all. She was there, sitting on the piano bench. Her dress had changed into a dark red number. It was more reserved than the dress I saw her in before, but still suited her. She had 2 glasses of brandy resting on top of the piano. I looked into the small mirror by the door and straightened my tie and hair. All the while, my eyes darted between her and my reflection. With a casual saunter, I joined her in the shadowy part of the stage. "Didn't think you would beat me here," I said smoothly. "I live close by," she said, placing a thin cigarette between her lips. "Bars are the perfect places to relax, this one especially." "Yeah, I know your type," I said. "I'm sure," she smiled. "Your type, I take it." "You know, you are," I said, surprised at how easy the answer was. I thought my type was the complete opposite, but then I realized that I was thinking of easy women, weak women. This woman spoke to something inside my heart. Want to hear something, Larry?" she hummed. "Is it your name?" I asked. "Something better." "I'm all ears." She turned to the piano. My smile slipped away as her hands reached for the keys. Her fingers were perfect, delicate, and slender, yet from the first note I could see experience and skill. Confidence when playing the piano takes time. Confidence when playing jazz requires years of practice. My smile was gone after a few seconds. I could see her fingers, I could hear the notes, but for the life of me, I can't recall how she played any of it. The song was so indescribable. I find myself staring at every word I write with absolute scrutiny, unsatisfied with every single one. I want to say it was sad, I want to say it was happy, I want to say something other than it was jazz. Jazz. That's it. A professional jazz pianist, and I can't come up with anything more than just. It sickens me that all these years meant nothing the moment her hands graced the ivory. I knew the crowd was gathering. I knew I blocked their view of the piano, but I didn't care. I needed to see everything, not that it made a difference if I did. I don't know how much time passed since she finished. It was a journey, a masterpiece. A song that could tame men, soothe the most broken hearts, and end bloody wars. It commanded all attention and adoration. When she finished, she stood up from the bench. I watched her walk away from the corner of my eyes. I couldn't tear my eyes from the piano. I felt her lips near my ear. "Pretty good, huh?" she said. "Why don't you give it a shot, Larry?" I didn't hear her footsteps, but I knew she was gone. I sat down at the bench, my teeth gritted and my fingers shaking with eagerness. I placed my hands right above where I think she started. My brow was so furrowed in concentration that it ached. Hands down, and immediately the chord was wrong. I adjusted and tried again and again and again. It felt like an argument in my head, voices constantly fighting to guide my hands. I will save madness and just tell you why I stopped. Well, I was forced to stop. The owner dragged me from the piano. I was told later that I fought him all the way. He called Fred, Sammy, and Cartlon to help. They found me outside on the pavement with bloody fingers. It was dark, but I don't think it was the same night. Not only had time passed, but something changed in the city around me. The shadows seemed deeper than they should have been. like the structure of the buildings and the concrete ground would bend within the darkness. In the light, it felt so delicate and paper-thin. I felt that if I stepped in the light, my feet would tear through it all and I would fall, but the darkness didn't feel any more secure. Black and white, light and dark were working together against me. "Take me home," I said. I had a piano at home. The moment my front door was open for me, I shut it behind me and marched to the bench. It wasn't as good as the piano at the jazz bar, but that didn't matter. I needed to try again. I started playing, desperately, as if I was trying to breathe through my actions. I didn't feel pain. I felt fear. The song was a ghost in my head, fast becoming a whisper. It wouldn't be long before that whisper vanished. I needed to play. Once more, I was dragged from the piano, but it was several days after I sat down. The ringing of the keys faded and I could hear my whimpering. I was dragged through a busted-down door and into an ambulance. My cries got louder and louder. It felt like everyone I had ever loved had died tragically and terribly before my eyes. The song was gone. The lights were startling and the shadows were inky nothing. The world had become this flat, monochrome reminder of my failure. I was heavily sedated. When I woke up, my hands were bound in bandages, metal rods sticking out, holding every bone in place. I can't recall what they looked like as I was dragged into the ambulance. I didn't need to. The pain was enough. The band checked on me the day after I woke up Tuesday. They played at the jazz bar on Monday, so they didn't bother coming to see me. That's what I think anyway. It was awkward. My friends felt so distant, preoccupied with more important things. It was only out of a guilty feeling that they came to see me. These were assumptions I could bet on. I could see it in their eyes. I didn't care. I told them I would call them while I was out of the hospital, but I never did. I didn't contact them or go anywhere near the bar. Or a piano. Or a bar of any kind. Whatever pain I feel now can be numbed in the privacy of my home with a store-bought bottle of spirits. And although I can't remember the song, I still try to. I can't forget it. How can I after what happened? I played the keys till my fingers bled.